Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we're talking about yet another Minnesota Vikings victory. The Vikings go to London, technically playing on the road, and get a W over the Cleveland Browns. It was another ugly victory for the Vikings. I saw throughout my Twitter timeline that people were not necessarily happy about this win, but everyone can agree that we're all happy to be 6-2. So we got plenty to talk about here on the Rapid Reaction Show. And then, of course, at the end of the show, we'll do some Twitter takes, and then I've got some updates for you guys on what we're planning to do moving forward. So you can either choose to tune that part of the show out, cut it off early, or we can give you a little bit of information on what's going to be going on with About the Labor moving forward here. So let's jump right into it here, starting off with a word from our sponsor here. Shamrock's Irish Nook. This is in downtown St. Paul. I'm talking about it for the last couple of days here, so you should be pretty familiar with them at this point. 995 West 7th Street, downtown St. Paul. Once again, 55102. Excellent burgers, excellent booze. It's a perfect place to get your pregame on. They shuttle to both Wild and Minnesota Vikings games. Once again, the burgers are absolutely phenomenal. I personally believe they're the best in the state. This is, I made an argument on Twitter about a couple months ago that Five Guys has the best fast food burger. In my opinion, Shamrock's and then also their partner, the Nook, have the best Juicy Lucy available in St. Paul. So make sure to check out Shamrock's Irish Pub, and let's get into some Vikings football stuff here. As always, we've been starting with the quarterback position the last couple of weeks. Let's roll with that moving forward here. Case Keenum, somewhat of an uneven performance. If you look at the box score, this is why we do this show, right? This is literally where this show came from. His box score numbers pretty solid: 27 for 43, 288, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, QBR of 72. I mean, these are solid numbers. Obviously, a quarterback rating of 88.1 as well. These are solid quarterbacking numbers. They kind of give off the impression that he had a very good day today. In my opinion, he was solid once again, did enough to win, but still looks like a backup quarterback in my opinion. What did you see from Case Keenum today? What did you think of his performance? Are you feeling me on the whole uneven thing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's funny because I think at halftime he had 196 yards,
yeah,
I believe it was, and
yeah.
I feel like his first half was definitely the, inferior, I guess, the worst half of football that he played in comparison to the second half. I thought he was way more efficient in the second half. There were several throws in the first half he either missed. I believe one of the first couple of drives where they had a 3rd and short, and they kind of ran a semi little pick play for Jarius Wright to open him up in the flat.
Yeah.
And he totally missed him. He threw it as if Jarius Wright was about 6'4".
And he almost caught that pass too, for what it's worth.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that was just one example, but it felt like a lot of guys, guys are giving up yards after catch because they have to sacrifice,
yes.
They have to dive for balls to catch them, or they have to jump backwards, so the ball's behind them and they have to reach back to make the catch. It just seems like a lot of those things could be improved, but he's making the throws, but sometimes the placement's off enough to impact what could be after the catch. So he's doing enough to get the wins against these teams that aren't very good, which is fine by me right now. Moving forward, he's a very good backup quarterback. I completely agree with that take. But I do think the Vikings are limited if they stay with Keenum and try to make a playoff run with him, though.
Yeah, you look at Keenum's day, like Drew said, a lot of yards in the first half. I agree with you, man. It was not a good first half. Vikings got off to a very slow start. It didn't look good initially. I'll be honest with you guys. I was pretty confident all the way through the game, even when the Vikings went down a couple scores. This was a performance where the second half, as soon as the Vikings got into the end zone in the second half, I was very comfortable with how the team was, going to finish out this game. As soon as they got past our 21-point plateau, as we, love to talk about so much, I was very comfortable. But Case Keenum was. This is kind of who he is, right? He just played Case Keenum football, and he always gives his receivers a chance. He's not afraid to make that gutty throw downfield, which I certainly commend about his game. But at the same time, you make a really good point, and this is something that I think we'll be talking about, as long as Case Keenum is in Minnesota. He gives the receivers a chance, but there's also a lot of receptions created by guys like Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. These are two very good receivers. I thought the broadcast today with Gumbel and Trent Green was atrocious. But the primary reason why I thought that was because they were dogging Adam Thielen all day for being a product of Stephon Diggs, where, after watching 8 weeks of Adam Thielen, I think it's pretty fair to say that he creates his own plays.
I think he's one of 2 players now in the league that are top 5 in receptions and receiving yards, and that's obviously going to change after the bye week, but still, I mean, the respect at this point should change from, oh, look at this guy, he worked hard, he's a small school guy that worked his way up, to now this guy's one of the best receivers in the league.
Yeah, did you know he's from Detroit Lakes, though? Yeah, I mean,
I hadn't heard that.
Thielen comes out with another solid game today. Obviously, the numbers necessarily don't necessarily reflect that, how good he was today. Obviously, he has the touchdown and a couple of long gainers, but he also moved the chains a ton. He was big on third down, and then like Drew was saying, he adjusted to make a couple of very difficult catches on throws that, once again, Case Keenum gave him a chance to make a play, but this was an example. This is, a primary example. Today was a primary example of a game where if a starting quarterback, or let's say a superior quarterback, for those of you that do believe that Case Keenum is still a starting quarterback, was in the game, you probably would see some more yards after catch, and you'd see greater opportunities for the receivers in the open field. So, I'm going to go back to that word uneven. That's what I saw from Case Keenum today. It was an uneven game. He got the W, though. He did his job, and let's just keep this in mind here. I know that he's elevated his status to being a borderline starting quarterback at this point, but when he signed his contract, he went into the room and they told him, hey, we're signing you to be a backup quarterback. That's your role. And he is doing that role phenomenally, but don't get it twisted. Just don't get it twisted. Understand that the expectations for Case Keenum have not changed. They have not wavered from Pittsburgh to Tampa Bay all the way through Baltimore, and now obviously Cleveland. He has been the same guy throughout. It's just that he's an uneven football player that gets hot at times, and sometimes he looks really, really good, and other times, like this first half today, he looks really, really bad.
Yeah, I've noticed 2, I think, obvious strengths in his game, and then I think 1 obvious weakness that kind of almost evens out the 2 strengths. And so for the strengths, I see the pocket movement. Very good at navigating the pocket, stepping up when it's there, and then obviously escaping when it's necessary and able to make plays that way. And I think that his decision making is good too. I think when he goes through his progressions well, I think in comparison to at least what I thought he was going to be this year, and generally makes the right throw, the right throw given the situation, given what's open, given what the defense gives him. But then the accuracy is kind of wild, and that's where you see missed throws, or you see guys I saw Thielen a couple times today with the arms up like that. Kind of, I think he makes the right decision. It's just executing the throw is the inconsistency there is the problem. So I think both of those 3 things kind of even itself out, and so he ends up playing like a borderline starter, but mostly a high-end backup, which is fine right now because the Vikings are winning and they have a
cushion now.
Right, there's the cushion, there's the talent on offense, there's an offensive line that Riley Reef hasn't allowed a sack yet this year, and then obviously you have the defense playing lights out football. So he's doing enough to win, but I think going down the second half of the schedule, it's not going to be as easy as beating the Browns, the Ravens, the Packers without Aaron Rodgers, the Bears with Mitch Trubisky at quarterback.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of extend off of what you're talking about with his awareness, his pocket mobility, and his decision making ability to go through all of his reads. I think that's kind of what's creating this illusion that he's more than a backup quarterback. Because think about when a backup quarterback comes into the game. Generally speaking, he's going to stare down his number 1 receiver, and he's going to hit his safety blanket, which is either going to be a running back out of the backfield or a big tight end. That's what you typically see from backup quarterbacks. Now, what you've seen from Case Keenum, which is tremendous, by the way, I really don't mean to devalue his overall performance this season. I'm just trying to be objective in terms of what we're looking at for the future. But what he has been able to do is spread the ball around. He gets the ball to the correct guy more often than not, in my opinion. Now, sometimes those throws are inaccurate, but generally speaking, he has no problem throwing to Thielen, Treadwell, Diggs, McKinnon out of the backfield, Murray as well. Rudolph got involved today, which was nice to see, obviously. We saw David Morgan finally get his first 3 catches of the game this year. So Keenum has no problem spreading the football around, and that's a trait of a lot of elite quarterbacks. Think about the Tom Bradys, the Aaron Rodgers of the world. They spread the football around. That's what makes them so great and what makes them so consistent. Now, Keenum does that same thing. He just doesn't possess that high ceiling, or even high floor, I should say, as well, that these starting caliber quarterbacks or these elite caliber quarterbacks have. But from a mental standpoint, an intangible standpoint, Case Keenum is on the money. You'll never have a problem with this guy from an intangible perspective. It's just, does he have the arm talent? Does he have enough touch on his throws? There was one play, it was a first down to Diggs down the left sideline today. I'm going to go back and look at the film after the show. When I really felt like he threw a duck, and Diggs made a great play.
I know which one you're talking about. Yep.
He made a great play, sort of boxing out with his jump to catch the ball. You know, you ask, why do receivers always jump when the ball's coming in the direction? Some of the reason for that is to sort of box out when they're in the air and basically be able to create their own separation with their back and with extending their arms coming forward on a comeback route. But getting back to my point here, I thought Keenum threw a couple of ducks today, that being one in particular where Diggs saved him. But generally speaking, he's doing everything intangibly correct, and then he's uneven from a tangible perspective. And that, my friends, is a good backup quarterback in the NFL.
Right. Yeah, I think that's where people are getting this twisted with this whole backup. You know, should Keenum start the rest of the year? There's a difference between Keenum elevating his game and playing at a mid-tier to starter level and earning a starting job. There's a difference between that and Teddy simply not being ready to play yet, because I think you have to be pretty dumb at this point, in my opinion, to actually think Teddy at his best, at his ready-to-go level, is a worse quarterback than Case Keenum. That's not the issue right now. That never will be the issue, I don't think. It's simply how up to speed is Teddy Bridgewater. This is a new offense for him. This is, he'd spent 14 months except for the past 2 weeks since he's practiced, right? Mm-hmm. Getting him up to speed, getting him ready to play in an actual game is the challenge here. Once he's there, he's better than Case Keenum. He's a better starting quarterback, and you got to play him. And that's really the only, problem with this scenario right now. It's not that Case Keenum has elevated himself into top 20 quarterback categories or anything like that. He has remained Case Keenum this whole time, which is a very good and very reliable backup quarterback. But he hasn't proven anything more than that, because his defense and his supporting cast is making phenomenal plays on a weekly basis. It's just the way it is. I think like you said, don't get it twisted. Don't get yourself to be thinking that just because the Vikings are winning all these games that all of a sudden Case Keenum is this phenomenal quarterback lighting it up, and looking at the box score and looking at the win column is that should not be your only evaluation. Right.
Yeah, and we talked about this I think 2 shows ago. If the box scores were the same and the game result was different, I don't think as many people would be clamoring for Case Keenum. Let's say the Vikings were, 3-5 at this point instead, or 4-4. 4-4 sounds fair. Let's say they're 4-4. I don't think many people would be talking about Case Keenum as a potential starter moving forward.
And I think Andy Carlson brought this up too on Twitter today, but you can't, advocate, okay, well, the Vikings are on a roll and they're winning games with Case Keenum at quarterback. So you can't advocate for Keenum that way and then also not recognize Teddy Bridgewater's QB wins, if you will, in 2015. You can't play both sides of that fence,
Yeah.
So you got to pick. Yeah. You got to pick one. You're either for the QB wins or you're against it.
I personally am against it, and
same.
For that reason, I think that's why we're on the same page, that when Teddy Bridgewater is ready to play, which I think a lot of us believe will be right after the bye, that he is going to play football for the Minnesota Vikings once again. Definitely exciting times in Minnesota for that. I want to ask you one thing about Case Keenum before we get into the rest of the offense and then some defensive stuff. Do you see, his performance this season earning him some money elsewhere as a potential starter, like a la Brian Hoyer we've seen him do? Mike Glennon maybe. Josh McCown is another great example of this. Like you said, you just called him a borderline top 20 quarterback, which this season, pretty fair. I mean, he's been borderline top 20 caliber.
Yeah, given some injuries here or there.
Yeah. And that, generally speaking, with, good supporting cast, a good defense, some good special teams action, that's going to win some football games. And if you're a team like San Francisco, for example, and you're just trying to throw someone in there that gives you a chance while you try to find your franchise guy, Case Keenum might be an option.
So you're asking me if there's a team that will pull the Chicago Bears?
Yes.
Pay Keenum, Mike Glennon money?
Yes.
Because I believe this is just a 1-year deal, right, for Keenum?
Yeah.
So I think that's a very real possibility. We've seen over and over now how much teams are QB desperate to find a guy that they can rely on, and Keenum has been proven to be reliable in a sense that you know what you're going to get. I feel like every week.
Yeah.
I feel like he's been the same player. I guess I'm going to kind of discredit that Steelers game just because the circumstances were weird. But for the most part, this season he's been making good decisions. He's been moving around the pocket exceptionally well, and it's just been some accuracy problems where he'll hit a dime, once every probably 20 attempts, but there'll be a lot of kind of erratic ones in there as well. So that's what you're going to get from him. And if teams think that's serviceable for their team and what they want to do, then they might pick him up and throw him double-digit $1 million.
Yeah, absolutely. At the very, very least, Case Keenum has certainly proved to me, one of his doubters for sure, that he is definitely one of the best backups in the NFL, if not the best. So kudos to Case Keenum for getting another W today, regardless of the fact that we kind of expected it to come. He showed up, he did his thing in the second half, and he ran Cleveland out of the stadium. So good for Case Keenum. Let's talk about the backfield now. We saw another, fantastic performance from, really both guys. I know that Latavius Murray he didn't put up gaudy statistics by any means, but he did some damage. He did his role. I'm starting to see some Ahmad Bradshaw, Brandon Jacobs type of thing going on here.
I like that comparison.
The Lightning Thunder combo that we've talked about. And you remember when New York used to have Brandon Jacobs, Ahmad Bradshaw, and then Derek Ward was the third guy.
Derek Ward.
Yeah. And
Name drop.
You think about what the Vikings would like to do, assuming Dalvin Cook is in there as well. Dalvin Cook becomes the much better version of Ahmad Bradshaw. Jerick McKinnon becomes Mr. Ward. And then you've got Latavius Murray, your thumper, that looks a lot like Brandon Jacobs. So I think the Vikings are sort of following that model for New York, which that worked. That ended up in a Super Bowl title for them. So I'm okay with that. What did you think of Jerick McKinnon today specifically? And also Latavius Murray, how'd you think of, what'd you think of him kind of chipping in as you like to say, as you have been saying, Thunder and Lightning combo? What'd you think of it today?
Yeah, I would say the Thunder was not very effective today. I didn't think Murray, and maybe it was playing on the grass, maybe it was whatever. But, first of all, that Cleveland run defense, for what it's worth, is stout. Very good. Danny Shelton was a monster in there today. That's the force to be reckoned with. And we mentioned that several times on the pregame show and in the pregame podcast, that this run defense is for real. But I think the momentum in this game changed when they kind of shifted from Murray to McKinnon as kind of the workhorse lead guy. McKinnon just seemed to have an extra gear or an extra whatever it was, an extra kind of comfortability, I guess, with the Cleveland defense that Murray didn't have. And I thought McKinnon was kind of that shift to making him the primary running back. It seems kind of right around the middle of the game, maybe end of the first half to the second half. That kind of shifted things for the Vikings. They got that ground game going, and then that opened up some more efficient plays for the offense. So I thought McKinnon, both in the pass game and on the ground, was excellent. And I think moving forward, I think you stick with the hot hand kind of approach. It's just whichever guy establishes the run more effectively early on is the guy you got to stick with, because I think more and more this offense is proving that a good running game will set the tone for what Case Keenum or whoever that quarterback wants to do.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked a little bit about this in the last week's Rapid Reaction show, that the hot hand thing. Also, Jerick McKinnon talked about that during an interview this week. I believe I can't remember which media member it was, but someone asked him basically, what he thinks about the running back position moving forward, who's going to be the starter, in quotes. And he basically said it's going to be the hot hand. So that's what I expect moving forward. That's what we talked about. That's what seems to make sense. So today, in total, between the two of them, 34 carries, 88 yards, a 2.6 average, not awesome. 1 touchdown, and only a long of 10 today. Now, I think that these statistics are to some degree deceiving, because Murray, I thought, his numbers are atrocious. On paper, they're absolutely atrocious. 19 carries, 39 yards, 2.1 yards average. I thought he had a couple of very effective runs. And specifically Jerick McKinnon, 14 carries, 50 yards, only a 3.6 average with the 1 touchdown, obviously. I thought McKinnon was a lot more effective on paper than it shows, I guess. Because on the field today, I thought he was extremely impressive running between the tackles, run to the outside as well. And this is one thing I've noticed about him in particular, is that he has gotten a lot better in tight spaces. His wiggle and just his ability to sort of create yards after contact as well with the extra bulk on his body. He just seems to fall forward more, and he seems to kind of make a guy miss initially, which, as an offensive lineman, what you ask of your running back typically is for them to make one guy miss if they're going to plow ahead for you. And that's what McKinnon has been able to do, even against a stout run defense, as you said. Then getting into the passing game now, he was outstanding. He actually tied for the Vikings lead in receptions today with 6. So he was a good safety blanket. To some degree, that's on Pat Shurmur. I didn't think that he called a very good game. A lot of screens, a lot of weird stuff, but a lot of...
Yeah, that was weird in the first half.
Yeah.
A lot of those weird screens that he kept going to them over and over, and it finally kind of called it quits, I think, towards the end of the first half there. But, yeah, that was weird.
Right around the same time when the Vikings offense started working again.
Yeah, interesting.
Interesting, yeah. But I thought McKinnon was extremely effective in the passing game. This is something that we've been talking about for... basically since the genesis of this show. Get McKinnon more involved as a receiver. You could split him out wide. I saw before they went for 2, when Cleveland called a timeout before the 2-point conversion when McKinnon ultimately scored. But before that, the play that they lined up at, that Cleveland obviously didn't like and decided to call a timeout for, had McKinnon split out wide in trips. I like that kind of stuff. That stuff is fun to me. I think McKinnon can excel in that type of role, especially like a bubble screen type thing when you got guys like Laquan Treadwell and Michael Floyd in front of you that can block really, 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 really well, especially for the receiver position. I like what McKinnon's been able to do. I like that he's taking his role in stride. This is a tough season for him, too. He, technically lost his job to Dalvin Cook all this offseason. Also lost it to Latavius Murray. A lot of us thought that he wouldn't be a factor at all. And all of a sudden, he's coming back with one of his strongest seasons, arguably his strongest season to date. And he's became a complete running back. So, looking back at him adding that extra 15 pounds, that seems to have made quite a big difference for him. And I feel confident with him in the backfield now. Obviously when Dalvin Cook was back, there was, the confidence level was a lot higher, but relative to the situation, how much more could you really ask from Jerick McKinnon? He's getting close to 100 all-purpose yards every single week, and this week was no different for him.
Yeah, I believe he has, I think over the last 4 games, he has, 3 of them with at least 100 total yards and a touchdown, something like that, which is obviously super productive, given that he's kind of in a timeshare. And then another game I believe that he didn't have those numbers was the one Murray went for 100 and a touchdown. So the Vikings are getting production out of that running back position. And I think I'm going to read off a stat here that Matthew Collar tweeted earlier today from Pro Football Focus, that this ground game, it's getting established at some point each week, and it's leading to play action success. The Vikings have been extremely effective on play action passes this year. And today, they did play action on 12 of 44 dropbacks. And they completed 9 passes for 121 yards. Passer rating and a touchdown, by the way. Passer rating of 134.4. So right there that kind of, it shows how much things open up with a good running game. And, for the longest time, or at least not the longest time, but for that whole week after the Cook injury, at least myself, I kind of thought this running game would go down the tubes. And in fact, it's probably sustained a similar level as to what it was before. So kudos to both Murray and McKinnon for stepping up and kind of accepting a timeshare role and keeping this offense afloat.
Yeah, getting themselves prepared for that timeshare role. Murray is a guy that has had tremendous success in a timeshare role before. Obviously, before he came to Minnesota, when he was in Oakland, you saw him working with 2 other running backs, and that ultimately led to a Pro Bowl berth for him. So this is something that he's familiar with, and we've seen Adrian Peterson particularly talk about this. He's very full of himself. He loves to talk about his own numbers. But it's not easy to just get thrown into a game and get asked to carry the ball 3 or 4 times in a given drive when you haven't touched the ball in, basically a week sometimes. And Murray and McKinnon have done a great job of preparing themselves for that type of role, getting themselves prepared and not needing, 3 quarters to get going as we saw with Adrian Peterson for so many years sometimes. So, I'm very impressed with this running back position as a whole. Like Drew said, I did not expect this, amount of success after the Dalvin Cook injury. It's definitely stabilized the Vikings offense. It's keeping everything afloat. It's keeping Case Keenum afloat. This has been a tremendous stretch for both Murray and McKinnon, even if the numbers don't always show it, because like you said with that statistic from Pro Football Focus, sometimes just their presence on the field and their ability to break off some chunk yardage is going to be enough of a threat to get guys like Stephon Diggs or Adam Thielen on one-on-one coverage on the outside. And then, at times we've seen Case Keenum certainly take advantage of that. Before we get into the defensive side of the ball, I want to talk a little bit about Adam Thielen and Kyle Rudolph. Stephon Diggs basically absent from today. I think it's so funny with that injury report statistic that you gave a couple weeks ago, that whenever he's on the injury report, he's just not the same player. I think we saw that a little bit today. His numbers could have been a little bit higher with 5 receptions, around 45-ish yards, if that one catch, which was a catch in my opinion, something we'll talk about later on in the show, had gone down for him. But Thielen in particular really stabilized this offense, and then Kyle Rudolph as well, with a toe-tapping catch in the back of the end zone. What did you see in those 2 touchdown plays? What did you think? Obviously a dime from Case Keenum to the back of the end zone on the run, rolling out of the pocket to Adam Thielen. But then that play to Kyle Rudolph was basically all Kyle Rudolph. So what do you think of Thielen and Rudolph today relative to what Case Keenum was giving them?
Yeah, I mean, I thought Thielen has been fantastic all year. I think that there's not really much of a doubt there, and he has been exceptional too. I kind of realized today when I looked back and kind of remembered some of his plays from the season that he's been really a phenomenal chain mover as well. He's kind of made himself available on third downs. I think CBS, that was NFL Network, showed some stat of where Thielen ranks, and he's top 5 in the league or something in third down, first down receptions, if that makes sense. So he showed that today too. I remember that third and 15 right away in the beginning of the game. I think when they basically just ran 4 verts, and Thielen made himself available. He had to make a sliding catch, but he did make that catch, and then obviously that touchdown too. He just kind of he really just made himself available in the back of the end zone. The play action sucked the Browns in, and he was just kind of chilling back there. Keenum found him. So it was obviously Adam Thielen is, he's on my fantasy team. I know how productive he is. It's nice to have him in a PPR league because I think every game this year he's had 5 catches, which is incredibly rare given how much NFL teams can and do scheme against your leading receivers, and he still maintains that level of production every single week. He needs to be recognized as a top 15 receiver at this point, if not higher. And then obviously Kyle Rudolph on that touchdown catch. Any questions about his athleticism maybe answered after that one?
Probably went out the window. Yeah.
yeah, I think so. I mean, I think simply Keenum saw a 5'10" DB in front of Rudolph, and it's like, yeah, okay, I'll take that, and then tossed it up, and Rudolph made the play.
For what it's worth, you talk about how Case Keenum basically throws a dime once every 20-ish passes. Those 2 touchdown passes, the 2 plays the Vikings got 6 on, probably the 2 best throws that Case Keenum made all day long. So, hell of a game for Adam Thielen once again.
For what it's worth, I'd like to mention that the throw to Thielen doesn't seem watching it live, it doesn't seem like a very tough throw because Thielen's just standing there waiting for the ball.
Right.
But your window from throwing it over Thielen's head to the DB right in front, jumping up and tipping that ball is not huge. So for him to squeeze that in there was pretty impressive, I thought.
You definitely need to throw, add a little touch on that throw a little sauce on there.
But not too much touch.
Right, exactly. Just enough. A little bit of English relative to playing in London, obviously. So let's talk about the defensive side of the football now. Got off to an interesting start. Obviously, I think both of us predicted that Cleveland wouldn't score even 1 touchdown. They ended up getting 2 today. Isaiah Crowell gets the long one early in the game. Had a lot of Vikings fans wanting to go back to bed. I don't blame you guys for that. It was very early. What did you think of the overall defensive performance? For me, I saw a rough first half where it seemed like Anthony Harris in particular was kind of the weakest link. We saw Cleveland running directly at him. He obviously missed the tackle on that Isaiah Crowell run. But as the game went on, I thought he became more consistent, and also the Vikings defense became more consistent. We saw better pass rushes. Simply, as Cleveland got away from those quick throws that they were using to neutralize both Hunter and Griffin on the coming off the edge, once they had to get away from those and start using those 5- and 7-step drops to basically, get back into the football game, we saw this Vikings defense play like it always can. Mm-hmm. Everson Griffin extends his sack streak. Tom Johnson continues to be effective from the interior. Linval Joseph did his thing. Anthony Barr kind of quiet today. Xavier Rhodes, first time he's been burnt all season long as far as from what I can remember.
Yeah.
That was the longest.
He's turned around a little too late, it seemed like.
Yeah. And honestly, that took a perfect throw. That was a hell of a play by Deshaun Kaiser and his receiver to make a play on that pass. But that was the first time that I've seen. I think that's the longest play that Rhodes has allowed from scrimmage this season. I'll double check that, and we'll get back to that later. But what did you think from the overall defensive effort? Who are your superstars from today?
Yeah, I think this seemed like kind of that start was rough, right? And I think the difference between this year and last year is I look back to that Colts game and I remember the Vikings defense getting embarrassed early on, more than once, like they did today against the Browns, and they kind of folded after that. Same thing with the Green Bay game as well. I think you point to a couple other games too, where the defense kind of just folded after that and kind of gave up. And today, obviously, again, this is the Cleveland Browns that we're talking about, but they really stepped up and they really shut down anything Cleveland wanted to do after that. So I think that's a positive that I'm taking from this game. But I do think that it's somewhat concerning, that start, how easy it was for Isaiah Crowell to pick up those yards. I think that one long pass play, the check down one where Kendricks just completely left his assignment there, that will have to be cleaned up. And Kendricks does have a tendency to get, in the way in our terms, more aggressive than disciplined sometimes. But overall, I think a very good performance. Nothing really to worry about here. Everson Griffin was applying pressure all day long, just couldn't quite get home until the very end. I think that's probably going to be my defensive player of the game, just because it was cool to see him continue that sack streak. It was looking it was in jeopardy for a while there, I'll say that. But shout out to Harry Smith for missing the sack at the end and letting Griffin capitalize. Yeah,
you kind of gotta wonder if maybe Harrison sort of olayed that one and allowed Griffin to get it. But that's one of those things that we'll never know. I thought that Griffin, honestly, I thought he was pretty weak initially in the game.
Initially it was, yeah, but then he turned it up, and I think he was hitting the quarterback. He was hitting Kaiser quite a bit.
Yeah, 5 times in the game in total. He obviously gets his sack. He definitely altered the flight of the ball on one play as well. Griffin overall had a hell of a game, but I want to point out that Spencer Durango came out there and was really blocking very effectively. Obviously, a lot of that goes into the, I honestly think that Hugh Jackson called a pretty good game, especially early on. Once he had to make adjustments, that's when his team found itself in trouble because they simply couldn't make up the difference. But I was pretty, I thought that Hugh Jackson came out with a good plan to beat the Vikings defense. And to some degree, he might have given other teams a blueprint because of that quick passing game. And, if the Vikings aren't tackling,
that's part of the reason Griffin was so weak right away, too, was, that's what Zimmer said, I believe, when they had, I can't remember the sideline reporter's name, but she had talked to Zimmer, and that was the one thing Zimmer said was, well, they're not letting us get a pass rush because they're getting the ball so quick.
Right, and that's, that, to some degree, that's defense in itself, right? Anytime you're forcing a team to only play on 3-step drops, that's a defense in itself, assuming you can come up and make the tackles and, keep everything in front of you, as we've been talking about recently. But basically, that's the one concern I have coming out of this game, is that Cleveland was able to find some success doing just that: 3-step drops, quick passes, slants, quick outs, screens, bubble screens, all kinds of that stuff. That seemed to work pretty well against this Vikings defense, assuming that you could stay, pretty close on the scoreboard. Obviously, once you get to about around a 2-touchdown deficit, that's going to find you, having to drop back into 5- and 7-step drops. But for this, so against a good defense, let's say a better defensive team and an offensive team that has more, superstars or more dangerous players, more, just more talent as a whole, to be quite honest with you, just to be fair. That's a blueprint that could work against this Vikings defense. So that's the one concern that I have coming out of this game, is that they're going to see this on film now. I would expect Kirk Cousins and Jay Gruden to certainly come out with a quick passing game once we come out of the bye in 2 weeks here now.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I think really not having Andrew Sendejo in there was actually noticeable. I think you mentioned Anthony Harris kind of struggled a couple times, but I do think having Sendejo out led to more snaps of Harrison Smith in the box, and I thought he was phenomenal in the box.
What else is new?
Right. I mean, yeah, right. But I mean, he was called the blitz. He was making an impact multiple times. And I'm not just talking about the missed sack at the end, but he was making impact. He was hitting the quarterback. He was forcing Kaiser to step up into pressure. And then against the run, he made a bunch of stops as well, coming up, in run support as he always does. So I thought he was really, really, really impressive. Again, this is nothing new. But I think his performance needs to be recognized as well because, outside of that 26-yard touchdown, Crowell was averaging, I think, less than 4 yards a carry. So, I mean, it's not like the rushing performance is anything scary for Cleveland. It's just they had the one big run early that kind of, unevened, I guess I'll say that, or unbalanced their totals.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something that we've seen from the past. Obviously, we talk about Jordan Howard, seems like once every 2 weeks on this show. The Vikings are susceptible to allowing that big run play despite their run defense being so effective all season long. So that might be something to keep an eye on moving forward, is something that the Vikings certainly need to clean up. That's a mistake that can't continue to be made if the Vikings want to be, a Super Bowl contender, which honestly at this point, relative to their record, relative to where they stand in the NFC, I think it's pretty fair to consider them that. So they definitely got to clean up a few things in run defense, but as a whole, I thought they played very well, top to bottom, front to back. And before we get into giving out our game balls here, I just want to say that Trey Waynes looked pretty good out there today too.
He did.
I noticed immediately because he allowed that comeback route, like a 12-yard catch, like immediately, like during the first quarter. And I saw Twitter just explode with a bunch of Trey Waynes sucks. Trey Waynes, get him off the field. Where's Tremaine Brock? Like all this stuff.
Well, he only allowed 2 catches on 7 targets today for like 22 yards or something like that. So, I mean, come on.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like the overreaction with Waynes, it's like Vikings fans are like irritable with Trey Waynes, right? The second he does anything remotely negative, you see Vikings fans just freak out. So I just wanted to point to the fact that he actually had a stronger performance than Xavier Rhodes, in my opinion, today. So, for what it's worth, he's improving.
That's not too spicy of a take. It sounds a lot hotter than I think it is.
Yeah, it's probably just inherent to the fact that anytime you compare arguably the number 1 quarterback in the NFL to a guy that has produced, let's say, bottom feeder cornerback numbers, it's going to be hot. But overall, I was very impressed with Trey Waynes today. So coming off of that discussion now, who gets your game ball overall? Let's just go as a whole. Offense, defense, special teams, who was your game ball for the Vikings today?
I have a couple of nominees that I'm just going to kind of throw out there. I'm going to narrow it down to 3 guys here. Jerick McKinnon, Adam Thielen. I'll go 4 guys I'm going to narrow it down to. Harrison Smith and Daniel Hunter. So I have 2 offense, 2 defense. I'll probably end up giving it to Jerick McKinnon. And I'll say Jerick McKinnon because I think his presence on offense shifted the kind of how the efficiency of the offense. The first 6-7 possessions probably weren't very good. Keenum couldn't get into a rhythm. Latavius Murray wasn't doing much on the ground. They got McKinnon the ball. Things kind of opened up. Yeah. I will say, I thought Thielen made several big catches on 3rd down that really helped those touchdown drives. And then obviously I talked about Harrison Smith on defense, and I thought Daniil Hunter's forced fumble at the beginning of the second half was huge to shift momentum and give the Vikings a lead right away. So that was a big play as well. But overall, I'll give it to McKinnon.
Yeah, I guess both of us on the show, we try to get away from groupthink as much as possible. But in this scenario, I have to give it to McKinnon as well because I don't. Adam Thielen was outstanding. Harrison Smith, like you said, very good game. Daniil Hunter had a key turnover. There's a lot of guys that had solid games. Everson Griffin, you could throw him into the bunch as well. Honestly, Case Keenum, to some degree, probably deserves some credit for this win. A lot of guys had good games today, but Jerick McKinnon was the shining star. He was the brightest of all the stars today, in my opinion. He made a difference not just on the field, but just providing that spark that seemed to raise the Vikings' confidence level throughout the game. Just the way they came out in the second half when McKinnon started rolling, it seemed like a whole different Vikings team. If the Vikings had came out that way in the first half, I think the Vikings probably could have won this game by a lot more than they already did. So McKinnon is my guy today. He gets my game ball. So from there, let's jump into the Twitter takes for the week, and then we'll wrap up the show with our sign out.
Yeah, we have a few of these today. We're going to be some more quarterback discussion. But let's see. First one from Matt P _BU. He says, please tell me Teddy will be starting in Washington. And then, so we got Adam West at A West E number 1. Is Bradford the only injury to linger through the bye? And he also asks, is this real life? So kind of quarterback situation. What do you think kind of the rest of the year? How's it going to play out?
I mean, I'm going to stick with what I've been rolling with the last couple of weeks here. I think this is Teddy's team starting against Washington. Case Keenum has done a phenomenal job. He's done a great job handling this role and handling all the scrutiny that comes with it. And on top of that, handling just the unknown. The fact that he may not, he hasn't necessarily known if he was going to start the next week coming off of a win at any point here. So I think it's going to be Teddy Bridgewater. Case Keenum's done a great job. Sam Bradford has done a great job. But I think that ultimately what we're going to see here is I think we're going to see Sam Bradford make the move and go to IR eventually here. I just think that the last time we saw him, he just looked wounded.
By the way, I did see him on camera today briefly when they showed Kai Forbath kicking on the side. You could see Bradford just chilling there with his arms folded. But that's the first I've seen Bradford shown on camera on the sidelines with the Vikings, really since the Bears game.
I wonder if he went to London just to see the sights.
It's possible.
Because, I mean, he had no other reason to be there. We saw Joe Thomas stay home in Cleveland, I believe. I don't know. Getting back to
Myles Garrett stayed home.
Yeah. Getting back to the question here, though, I think it's Teddy's team moving forward. And, yes, this is real life.
Yeah, I think it's real life, too. It's really weird because it's weird to be optimistic about a team that doesn't have a starting quarterback, really.
Yeah.
But, I mean, all signs point to Teddy being ready to go and probably playing by at least week 11, by the home game against the Rams, which, by the way, is shaping up to be a really, really important and really, really good game.
Yeah.
Next question from Johnny Ash at Johnny Ash 11. We're gonna talk more about these games after the bye week. The next 5 games: at Washington versus Rams, at Detroit, at Atlanta, at Carolina. It's a pretty vaunted 5-game stretch there. Yeah. What's your win-loss prediction for that stretch right now?
Okay, well, let's go through this piece by piece because we're working with 5 games here. So, Washington. I think the Vikings at Washington, they should be favored to win this game, especially if Teddy's on the field. I would expect that to be a win. Even though it is on the road, I do think the Vikings will find a way to get a win. Washington did not look good this week. On to the next one here against the Rams. That's going to be a tight game. I think Drew alluded to a fun point here. That's going to be a very, very, very important game, for tie-breaking purposes, for sheer record, standing in the conference, who gets a bye ultimately. It's going to be a very important game. I want to see how Teddy performs against Washington first, but I'm going to say that the Vikings lose that game. I'm going to pick that one.
I actually agree with that, and I hate that we're agreeing on this so far, but yeah.
I'm going to pick that one as a loss simply because I haven't seen what Teddy could do yet. If he comes out throwing fireballs, I mean, that prediction changes immediately, but I want to see more from Teddy first. Detroit, I think the Vikings are going to win that on Thanksgiving. I don't think Detroit is all it's cracked up to be, like we've been talking about in the last couple of shows. They probably should have won that first game at home. I don't see any reason why they can't go to Ford Field and win on Thanksgiving. Atlanta on the road. This is an interesting one because this is a team that can get hot, and then they're really, really scary when they get hot. Obviously, they're not playing too well right now. They got to win this week. That's good for them. I'm going to pick that as a loss as well. They're playing on the road. I think that Atlanta's going to figure it out over the next, 4 weeks here. So I'll pick that one as a loss as well. So through 4 games so far, I've got the Vikings at 2-2, and then they'll go to Carolina. I expect the Vikings to win one of those 2 games, at Atlanta or at Carolina. So overall, I'm going to say 3-2. I'll say that they beat Washington, lose to the Rams, beat Detroit, lose to Atlanta, beat Carolina.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to I'm going to have to agree with every single one of those that you picked. I hate that because we're supposed to have differing opinions. But, I mean, Washington I think is meh. I'm not a big Kirk Cousins fan myself, but yeah. I know others are. But then that Rams game, man, they are proving to be for real. Coaching staff there, the turnover there has proved wonders in a good way. And then that defense is still that defense. Aaron Donald's is still a force. So I think that'll be a really tough one for this Vikings team, especially given that it'll probably be Teddy's either his first start or it will be his second start, or it will be Case Keenum's first start against really a playoff team since when you go back to maybe the Pittsburgh game.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then I think they can beat Detroit on Thanksgiving. And then Atlanta and Carolina, I think they'll split those as well. I do think the Vikings had the upper hand against Carolina because I think back to that game last year at Carolina where they handled the Panthers offense with ease, despite the first 8 minutes of the game.
If you shut down Cam Newton, that team is basically done for.
Right.
So,
yes.
The same thing could honestly be said about Matt Ryan as well. Honestly. So I think that makes sense for the Vikings to split those two games. NFC South is pretty stacked, by the way, and under the radar point here too. Something that we'll definitely talk about during Rams week. Sean McVay versus Mike Zimmer is going to be a clash of the Titans. There's an offensive wizard against, he literally looks like a defensive coach. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be a absolute battle. Very excited for that. That's something we'll definitely be talking about in the next couple of weeks here.
I'll go back to Matt P. Because he also asked us about trade deadline coming up if the Vikings are going to move. I tend to side with Mark Sessler and that the Vikings should just stay put. But I do see, I think Jimmy Graham's been thrown around as a possibility. Are you seeing anything that's worth noting?
I'm with you as well. That I don't think the Vikings need to do anything, or I should say, I guess I'm with Mark Sessler on this one, that the Vikings don't need to do anything to necessarily improve at the deadline because, they're going to inherently improve just by getting healthier over the course of the bye. For what it's worth, Sean Borman, Vikings Territory writer, threw up an awesome article around halftime today, so if you didn't check that out during the game, he brought up a couple of ideas, potential trade guys that are trade candidates, also guys that the Vikings could potentially trade for. I like a couple of the names that he threw on this list. For example, I think that, like you said, the athletic tight end, Jimmy Graham, would be interesting. I don't see any chance the Vikings actually go after him, though, just because I really doubt anything actually happens. Yeah, I don't...
there's certainly possibilities that we could look at entertaining, but I really doubt anything happens.
Yeah, there's he also mentioned Carlos Hyde, who I've gotten questions about on Twitter for, it feels like 2 or 3 weeks now. I like his fit, but I'm going to reiterate the same point that I've made to everyone that's asked me that on Twitter. I hate trading for running backs. If I'm going to trade a 5th-round pick, I may as well just draft one next April in the 5th round. I mean, guys like, Alfred Morris, for example, a 6th-round pick, a serviceable running back. I don't want to trade resources to get a running back ever. I do like Carlos Hyde. I think he's a good player. He's also injury prone, which is something the Vikings running back depth chart can't handle right now. So to answer this question simply, I don't see the Vikings making a deal. I would like to see them do something like Bill Belichick, right? Like trade like a 7th-round pick for a washout guy that they could potentially turn into a gem. Something like that. And I don't have any names off the top of my head. I'd have to research this a little bit. Maybe this is something we could talk about during the bye week. But, again, I don't see any chance the Vikings make a trade. I think this team is very, very solid. They're getting healthier. They got the bye week to get healthy now. And obviously Teddy Bridgewater coming back probably shores up the biggest hole that we've seen this season so far.
Yeah, and our final question from Bradley Smith at B24 Smith is asking about the Diggs sideline catch and why it wasn't ruled a catch, because I was a bit confused about this too. Yeah,
this pissed me off. Legitimately, I was mad about this because, I share everyone's sentiment when we say, what the hell is a catch? Just someone define it, with words, and do it in a short, definitive manner. Tell me what a catch is. You're going
to please tell the listeners about your experience at the NFL officials meeting in Mankato, because I was there and it was kind of funny.
All right, so I tweeted about this today. So for those of you that are interested, the Vikings every single year at training camp, they'll hold an officials meeting for the media guys to come in there and basically ask the officials any questions. The officials also throw up a slideshow and a short video basically explaining the new rules, the new additions to what has been changed, all that kind of stuff. And at the very end of this presentation, everyone gets to ask questions if they want. So, I let Chris Thomason ask his question. I believe Eric Thompson asked a question. And
Kevin Seifert in there too.
Kevin Seifert was in there as well. He actually asked a phenomenal question, got a great response, which kind of provoked me to be like, all right, you know what? Everyone's having a good time. Let's figure out what a catch is. And so just keep this in mind. When generally speaking, when I'm sitting in like a press conference standing, I'm not one to ask a ton of questions. I'm more of a listener. I like doing my questioning on one-on-one interviews because I feel like in a press conference setting, it's everyone's getting the information. I don't necessarily need to ask anything. So generally speaking, I wouldn't ask a question here, but no one had brought up the catch. And I was just like, what the hell is going on here? Everyone wants to know the answer to this. I'm going to ask about it. So I raised my hand like I was in 4th grade again and basically said, have any changes been made to define a catch better? Are there any, has anything changed in that regard, or do we still not know what a catch is? And honestly, I said it a little bit more professionally than that, but that's the general gist. And the guy looked at me, and I swear to God, he stared into my soul. He looked at me and was just like, no, the catch rule is still the same. And just literally the whole room got pissed. Like, everyone was like
I've never seen a bunch of dudes get so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, because there's a head official kind of there that's been being a head official, and there's a bunch of other kind of guys like learning, how to be an NFL ref, and none of them know what to say. They just said, no, we haven't made any new changes, but we're hoping to make it more clear or something, along those lines. Like, super professional cliche answer.
Right, yeah, and it was funny because you saw all the media members kind of like lean forward in their chairs, like their ears perked up as soon as they heard catch rule, and then the second the head official got wind of the question, everyone just kind of was just like sat back down and just like leaned back in their chair. It was extremely awkward. I wish I had not asked the question. But point being here, getting back to Stephon Diggs now, I don't know why that wasn't a catch. Okay, and this is why I don't know why it was a catch, right? Because on the field, the ruling was that it was a catch. So now, upon review, the only way to reverse that call is to see conclusive evidence proving the other side. There was no conclusive evidence on that play that Diggs did not make that catch. He got a knee down, and the only thing that you could argue was that the ball kind of moved around in his hand a little bit. And in my opinion, I don't care if it's still in your hands and it might be moving. You still caught the ball.
That's part of the rule. Like, that's so fishy, is that a player can have possession of the ball and the ball can still be moving at the same time. Like, those are not mutually exclusive things,
Yeah.
Like, you can, like, I thought Diggs had possession there. He was just moving the ball because it wasn't like it was in a position where if he had landed on the ground, the ball could pop loose from the ground. So he was moving the ball to avoid that, and that I think is what caused the incomplete pass, because the ball didn't move when he hit the ground. It was moving as he was falling, and that was after he had a foot and a knee down. So I don't know, but
as far as I'm concerned, that was definitely a catch. It got taken away from Diggs, but ultimately the Vikings found a way to get the W anyways, so it doesn't really matter. But yes, I certainly, I'm with you on this one. That one got my my adrenaline boiling a little bit around, especially in the morning time too. That was that woke me up. That play woke me up. That was a dumb call. And honestly, the officiating the last couple of weeks has been pretty subpar, to say the least. It was
say that about every week. Every week, every game, every play.
I guess, but at the same time, I kind of felt like we had the replacement officials in there a couple times this week. I just feel like it's really been very, very poor. But I will say it was nice to not have Jerome Boger out there calling a flag on every single play. It was nice to see the officials let the Vikings play, and the Browns play for that matter today. So overall, Vikings get a W. As far as I'm concerned, that's definitely a catch. But it is what it is. We can't change it, and ultimately the outcome was what we wanted. So there's that. So that about wraps up the show for today. Like I said during the introduction, I wanted to, if you want to stick with us for the next couple minutes here, I've got a little bit of an extended sign out here talking a little bit about what we're going to be doing next week and what's going to be going on here with the About the Labor podcast moving forward. So I'll start with the fun stuff here. Next week, obviously, the Vikings are on bye. So Drew and I have been concocting kind of an experiment, an idea. What we're going to do is first of all, we're going to come up with some sort of award list. We're going to do it. Basically, next week is going to be a mid-season award type thing. We'll do an offensive show and a defensive show. And what we'd like for you guys to do is, we've obviously come up with some awards, but if there are any particular awards that you would like for us to talk about, discuss, please send those to our Twitter account, Vikings ATL Pod. Drew and I will be working on that, obviously, for Wednesday's show. And then, we'll have polls up throughout the week to kind of get your guys', opinion from a collective, collectively on Twitter, to kind of discuss that and go. Basically, the point here is for you guys to get your say here. So please vote on those polls. Please send us in any thoughts that you have, or possibly any awards as well. Also, About the Labor pregame show will not be here this week, obviously, because there is no game to be played. Therefore, no pregame show. So Drew and I are planning to do a live show on Shindig midweek. Our tentative plan is for 6 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday. Hope to see you guys there. We'll keep you updated if that changes on Twitter. Once again, that's at Vikings ATL Pod. Now, on the business side of things here, this is for the non-football. If you're not interested here, this is the part of the show where you might want to turn it off. But moving forward here, we're going to be adding some more advertisements to the show. I wanted to fill you guys in on this just because you guys have become as big of a part of this show as we are, honestly. And so I wanted to keep you guys in the loop. So I thought it was important to let you guys know what's up. So obviously we've been having the advertisement at the beginning of the show. I assume a lot of you guys probably just skip right through that since we always list what time it's at. But moving forward here, we're gonna be adding likely an advertisement in the middle of the show. Again, it'll be about 30 seconds long. Should not take a whole lot away from the show at all. Honestly, you can run right through it if you want, but I think it'll probably blend together pretty well. And I try to mix it up. These will be non-scripted advertisements for the most part, so we can have some fun with those. And the game plan is also as well to add a third advertisement at the back end of the show as well. The plan here, obviously, is Drew and I want to make some more money. The show has become profitable over the last couple of weeks. We're very excited about that. We've had advertisers approaching us, pretty consistently over the last couple of weeks, and it's been absolutely awesome. So first of all, thank you to you guys for consistently listening to the show, being the greatest listeners out there. It's been absolutely awesome for us. We're having a great time, and finally we're starting to make some money off of this thing too, so it's a lot of fun. So for those of you that don't like advertisements, I'm sure everyone hates advertisements. I'm sorry, it's kind of part of the process here, but
hey, I will say this though. I would suggest that the listeners listen through the advertisements because you don't want to miss any prizes, discounts,
right,
etc., promo codes, whatever it may be from these businesses that we have yet to reveal. But those are things you don't want to miss. So I would suggest that you still listen through them because you're going to be there'll be some nice opportunities that will be made available to you.
Absolutely, and we've been working hard to try to get advertisements that are, or advertising sponsors, I should say, that are work for the genre of this show, right? So we try to get beer, for example, because beer and football mix like peanut butter and jelly, for example. Moving forward, we'll have some winter stuff as well. Obviously, as the snow starts to fall in Minnesota, that will become important. And we're also looking into getting some food stuff as well. So these should be fun advertisements. This isn't going to be like Dollar Shave Club and MeUndies and all that crap that you hear on, your national podcast. So we'll try to make them as fun as possible. But I just wanted to let you guys know that we will be adding a couple more ads on here. And thank you guys once again for everything that you do for us, keeping us, we have a lot of fun doing this show. I'll just be honest with you guys. I look forward to doing this 3 times a week. And I've seen a couple of people credit us for this. It is difficult to remain consistent. You go 3 times a week every single week, especially when you're going Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But it's been so much fun that I honestly don't even think about it. So thank you for everything you do. I'm sure Drew also, echoes all of my sentiments
I do.
here. It's been a blast for us, and we're really looking forward to what's next for the About the Labor podcast, and we'll keep you in the loop moving forward on what the game plan is here. So look for those ads moving forward here. I believe we'll start having 2 ads beginning for Wednesday's show. I'm not 100% positive on that yet, but we'll see. And yeah, Vikings will always be main center of the central topic here. We'll try to always make sure that the ads are never consuming the show. That's very important to us as, I guess, mediators in this Vikings conversation. So thanks again for listening to the About the Labor podcast. Thanks for sticking around for the extended sign out today, and look forward to our midseason awards dropping on Wednesday and Friday, and also the About the Labor pregame show, which I guess will be the About the Labor midweek show on Wednesday around 6 p.m. Central Time. Thanks again. iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, VikingsTerritory.com. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube if you haven't already, and we will catch you guys later on this week.